So, what do you guys think about the Celeste Riva story with Mr. D4VD or David, as we call him, right? You guys think he's guilty? I mean, obviously, I think he's I think he's guilty as heck. I mean, let's think about this for a second, right? So, he's on tour, and this Tesla is sitting on the street with Celeste's remains in two separate bags, dismembered, right? And these, her remains is in this car parked on the street. You know, you either got to be an idiot or something in you just, is so self-centered that you just couldn't understand how stupid that was. I mean, I must admit, right? I said to myself, I said, maybe was framed. Just maybe he's not guilty of this situation, because my thing was, who would commit a crime and do something so stupid? Especially if the body began to reek of that certain odor after a person expires, right? So I said to myself, I was like, this dude, maybe he's not so guilty. But when I began to watch the news reports and I began to see what they actually had on him, like, for example, the CP, I'm using code words, for example, and they got a ton of that. Now it's coming out that she wasn't the first victim. And then it's also coming out that she was an informant, in so many words, or she's a witness, which is still, I guess, to be determined if she was an actual witness, like she was working with the authorities, because of the way that they have been explaining that since he's been to court this past Monday, but I don't know. I think he's guilty. I think he's done it. There's something about a person who becomes the center of attention, and you become the it person that everyone is favoring and flocking to because of your fame and status. It's still stupid, though. I mean, if I'm being honest, I mean, the fact the murder itself is sad. It's crazy. And you got these people that are judging, Celeste and her character and different things like that. The coroners is even saying that they found drugs in her system. I think that David exposed her to all of that. She was 13, but now they're saying that he began to speak to her when she was 12. I even heard something the other day, but don't quote me on this again, because there's a lot of information out there right now, that she may have even been 11 when he was first introduced to her in one of those online chat rooms. 11. And he was 20, 19 years old, something like that at the time. I mean, come on, man. I mean, are you worse than R. Kelly? And I was a big fan of R. Kelly. I was one of them. That's another story, but I was a big fan of R. Kelly. So, there was a debate the other day saying that if R. Kelly was released today and had a concert, would you go? I probably would. I mean, I don't support none R. Kelly did because I got daughters. You know what I'm saying? I think R. Kelly was sick for that. But I think he's another dude or another person that's a great example of that syndrome of, I can do whatever I want to do, even though it's sick to be attracted to young girls. I think that David had the same sickness as R. Kelly, but worse. Obviously, we know R. Kelly's was PD. They make it seem that way, but David was obsessed with death. And even if that was after he had committed this crime, but he was obviously obsessed with a few different things too. But did he do it? I think he did it. In my opinion, I think that he groomed Celeste. I think he made her feel special in some type of way, and he somehow got her into his presence and influenced her in a way where she felt, that she had become a woman, for lack of better terms, where she could make her own decisions, because you're 12, right? And she began to disappear, run away from home at 13. Now, I must admit, I thought that when I first heard this story months back, I thought that because they label her as a runaway, a habitual runaway, right? So I figured she's just a kid that's, rebellious and just figured she'd do whatever she wanted to do and came up missing. And she somehow ended up in the, tragically dismembered in the back of this car or the trunk of this car until I began to hear more about this case. And then I could see that it was way more to that. And now I really see her as more of a victim. I mean, I saw her as a victim anyway, but I entirely see it that way now. Because I mean, what does a 12 and a 13-year-old really know about life and about relationships and about different people? I mean, because we can see the videos of her and this guy out there like they were a couple. I mean, you could easily say they're just hanging out. But come on now, you know the difference between friendships and two people hanging out and a couple hanging out doing couple things. Now, in some of this, these videos and these pictures, I admit she looks a little bit older, but if you really focus in on her, she looks 13. And I mean, the fact that he was okay with that. And I'm gonna even go as far to say that there's got to be people around him that knew that too. We talked about Diddy and the Diddy situation. Like, how do you not say anything, or how do you not push back on that? Same thing with David. Some people knew. Now there's again going back to the informant part of this conversation, and they're talking about this new person that's coming out and talking how she really is working with the authorities, and she really is giving interviews with them and expressing some of the things that were going on. I mean, so obviously, let's touch on that a little bit more, right? So the way they're explaining is that there were two homes. That obviously David had one home where he kind of stashed away Celeste, but the informant is saying that it wasn't just Celeste, it was herself and possibly some other people. And that was probably David's way of hiding them away from those that, as I was just saying, were probably, in my opinion, probably had some knowledge of what was really going on. Like, for example, I don't know, his staff, maybe the caretakers of the home he was, whoever it was, management, whoever it was. I mean, it had to be people that knew. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Because how do you around these situations do you not know? Was David taking care of these individuals that were around him? Because we all know money talks. And again, not to keep talking about it, but we talking about R. Kelly, for example, right? And a lot of the reason why people didn't say anything was because of the money and the successes. I even heard one statement where the record company executives were saying, like, look, we know what he's been accused of, but he's the reason our lights are still on. He's the reason that these paychecks are still coming, because we know the work that R. Kelly was doing. Is this the new, I guess, I hate to say it like that, but is he the new R Kelly? Because he's going to jail, right? Is that what David was becoming? I mean, you just never know what people are doing behind closed doors. You know what I'm saying? But obviously the court proceedings are fresh, and we're just now hearing a lot of this information. And I was really going down the rabbit hole the other day because I was really trying to find out really the bits and pieces of what was really going on. But I think it's just too early. And I think everybody is jumping on and making the assumptions. But when the court case actually really gets underway, we're going to hear it all. Because that 40 terabytes of information that they found in his phone, along with the PD, it's being said that the defense hasn't had a chance to review this information yet. And even with the little bit that we do have, for some reason, which I think they're going to be the pin on him, if they can't pin on him the murder, they at least got the PD from what they found on their phone. But I think they got way more than what they're willing to tell us. There's even accusations that there's some other crimes out there that he could be guilty of. But again, that's just speculation, because I've heard a lot, but this David kid, I mean, there's these stories about words, and be careful about your choice of words, because words have power and the things that you say, right? And how he was just so obsessed with death, and his songs were just obsessively about death. But the crazy thing about that, and for example, we talked about Tupac and Biggie and how they tragically lost their lives, right? But I digress, right? But the thing is, it's said that he wrote this music after Celeste had died. So they're saying she died in April. Their calculating her death from sometime around April 13th of last year. And they found her body in, if I'm not mistaken, in September, something like that. Right. So I think it shows his mentality. I think it shows where David's mindset was at. There's information about an ex-girlfriend of David's that came out and spoke, and she's very vague. I don't know how to feel about that, though, because it almost feels like she's asking for attention, right? Because she talks about how he was a religious person when they met and how he introduced her to, the faith that she now has, and how sometime after the homicide was committed, which she must have been unaware of, she talks about pleading with him to repent and how he needed to change his ways. I can only imagine the things that he had shared with her, but I highly doubt he had shared with her this horrific crime. Obviously he has, like I said, some crazy ways of how he lived his life, and maybe she was referring to that. Maybe she has some stories about those two's relationship that we don't know about. Right. But going back to, Celeste's possible involvement with the authorities, and is that the motive? Is that why he killed her? In my opinion, I thought to myself, I'm like, well, why would she go back if they began to have problems? Because it's said that the younger people that followed their story when she was still alive and they were hanging out and on social media, things like that, that her vibe towards David had changed. It shifted. It went from them being a couple to her despising him as a person, and how she had become frustrated with him, and she began to look at him in a very negative way. How did he treat her? Did he mistreat her? Because again, like I said to myself, I said, why would she? And Self said, huh? but why would she? If he, like, for example, if he raped her, or if he assaulted her, or if he involved her in some form of cult-like activity or something like that with other parties, or whatever the situation might be, how was he able to convince her to come back to the home the same night that the authorities are saying that she died? So I don't know if I believe it was based on her working with the authorities and the motive. In my opinion, what I think, because her energy shifted from him, from being in favor of him and being adamant about, being in this weird illegal relationship with him, to this disdain and dislike for him. I mean, that says a lot. We know that the family and the parents came out and gave us a little bit. They didn't give us a lot, because again, there's just a lot of speculation out there, but they made her out to be like a disruptive child, or a kid that wanted to be older than what she really was, like disrespectful. And when in reality, she was just obsessed with David. She was running away to be with him. I found that out watching the case, because again, they made it out to be something else. She was running away because of him. But like I said, if it was really something that bad, why would she trust him to go back over there? So again, what I think personally, I don't personally believe is because she was working with the authorities at the time. I think she had something on him. I think he had involved her in some situations that was inappropriate. We definitely know that they were sexually active together. She probably became jealous of maybe the other girl or girls, that all of a sudden she wasn't the center of attention anymore and other people were. And then that got her attention and made her think and say, well, gosh, I was a fool. You were taking advantage of me this whole time, because now all of a sudden this other person is more important than I am. Were you using me? And I believe that happened. I believe that they had a conversation. Now, this is all weird, because the fact that we're saying this about a 13-year-old and a 21-year-old, like they were in a regular relationship when it wasn't, even though it was a relation. Gosh, this is weird. You know what I'm saying? But I think because in adult relationships, that's the kind of stuff that happens. And women are different. I love you guys, but you guys are different. You guys, when you guys are scoring, you take it personal and you take it to heart. You know what I'm saying? You don't forget. Like, guys, we're a little bit more, I guess, patient, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? We're a little bit more logical. We think with our emotions, but not as much, where you guys hold on to it. And I think especially a minor, because my thing is a 13-year-old, those hormones are brand new. Now, those puberty hormones, y'all know what I'm talking about. They brand new, and when they sit in and and they become active, they become active. And I'm thinking that maybe she just was in her feelings and felt like he don't care about me. He's not paying me the attention that he was paying me. I'm not that important. He just took advantage of me the other day, and now he's doing who knows what with such and who else. Or I've seen it with my own eyes, and I'm against this. I even heard a rumor the other day that says, well, maybe she was extorting him. I'm like, come on now. Y'all believe that? She 13. A 13-year-old is going to extort a grown man. Well, how? She's not even old enough to drive a vehicle. She's not old enough to drive a car. I mean, she's not old enough to rent her own place or buy a home. Those things that adults do. I just don't get. I just don't believe that. But what I do believe, I believe she thought she was in an adult relationship. She was a young lady that was in a position that she had no clue what she was involved in, and it turned into her losing her life. What I think like a lot of these, we watch these crime shows that are on YouTube, how these men become obsessive with these women who decide that they're not in the best situation and he can't handle it and he finds a way to take her life. I think personally that's what happened. I think she realized the situation she had got herself into. I think she probably could hear the adults in her life that truly cared about her in the back of her mind saying that this is not what you think it is. And now she could put the proof to those words based on whatever actions he had shown her in private. And I think she just flat out declared that she wasn't having it. And now, Grant, take that and take the things that she knew about him, the inappropriate things, including the relationship. The crazy part about that is that the evidence is out there because he was stupid enough to, go live and post stories about them and what their daily activities. He was stupid enough to do that. You know what I'm saying? But she had that fueled with that. So I think he just freaked out. He freaked out and said, "You're not about to ruin my career, my life. I want you in my clutches," because I think he thought he could control her, which he found that wasn't going to happen. And I think he freaked out and took her life. Like we talking about for example, if we're going into that, we're talking about the autopsy and what the autopsy showed. Those of you that actually checked it out, if you haven't checked it out, check it out right here. You can see in this format from the coroner's office that they believe that her cause of death was 2 stab wounds, one in the lower torso and one in the upper torso in the chest, one area, whatnot, right? In my opinion, I think that's a little. It's not as far fetched, but she had been dead for, at that point, what, 5-6 months, give or take, and she had badly decomposed her body. So I'm like, how can you really say that's what caused it? Obviously we can at least say that it was a stab wound that she received, or multiple stab wounds, but who's to say he didn't strangle this young woman? I'm sorry to say that, y'all, but it's eating me up just to even talk about these things. But there's so many different ways she could have died. She had been so badly decomposed. But the sad part about it is that no one could figure this thing out ahead of time, and maybe they could have gotten more evidence, in terms of pinpoint exactly what happened. But that's not even the biggest issue, how she died. The biggest issue is the fact that she was even involved with this person, and it was being considered like an adult relationship from this guy who was an adult himself, and he took it the place he took it. Yes, I believe he's guilty. I believe he did this. Again, it's too early to really say exactly what happened, because there's not a lot of evidence out there that they're releasing right now. The little bit that is out there, for example, they said that he took a drive shortly after they're determining that she died, and he drove to a desolated area and he spent time there. And they're saying, well, maybe that's where he did what he did to her corpse, right? But again, that's speculation. How do we know that for sure? Again, not to be like a broken tape recorder, but we talked about if he's actually one that did it, because it just makes no sense how her body was found and how it was left out on the street. But again, that's a whole nother story. I think he's guilty because the little bit that we do know, again, in terms of evidence, is his phone, because there's a lot of information on there that they know about that they haven't released to us, the public, yet. But the little bit they have says it, and it says he's guilty. He's definitely done. And I think it's a great thing that a person like that is not going to be on the street, because if he's that sick, I don't care what the situation is, and she wasn't the first. What was to stop him from doing it again? He needs to be where he is, and he doesn't need to be freed. Even right now, TMZ reported that he's crying about rec time, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you are said to be, I'm using code words, but guilty of PD, and you're guilty of murder of a minor and different things like that. Like, usually aren't the safe ones in jail, but again, as if we're talking about a person who doesn't think rationally, that's another story. But like I said, I'm just curious to know what you guys think. As this story unfolds, I'm going to follow it a little bit more, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more and get you guys' take on it. And we see where it goes. Like I said, it's too early right now. I'm very curious to know what those court proceedings are going to release. What they're going to show us, and allow us to see exactly what really happened. Because real quick, because again, they are keeping things under wraps, and he only got arrested when he did, because obviously the authorities in LA, they were a little frustrated with the fact that he was still able to be out and be free and live like a normal person, knowing that, with the FBI in so many words, knowing that he had parts in this, to some degree. They're knowing that he's somehow guilty in this whole situation. They were so frustrated, they decided to take it upon themselves to arrest him. I personally think that FBI was just trying to build a strong enough case to where it wasn't rushed to a point where he could get off. Because that's what they do. There's these statistics that says that they are 98, 99%, successful in their convictions. And I just think that's what they were doing, because a lot of this information, they've had this information for months, for quite a while. So I just think that's what they were doing. But again, once that information gets out there and we can see what it really is, then we can touch on this and have a more in-depth conversation about it. But again, let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear about it. We're going to keep this conversation going. It's your boy Cass with Taboo Topics.
Yeah.